All right, so today we're going to move on to doing the hair. You can see that while I did not record painting the background or painting the her chest area, that hard line that was left at the bottom of the neck actually works out because it's kind of at the cat clavicle and also where I believe the beginning of the more sheer material is located. All right, now Greta has hair that really really vibrates with color when it's hit by light. And I want to have that in the outer edges of the painting. So I'm using quinacridone gold to try to fill in these little spaces between all of the masking that's over here. And I'm hoping that I didn't mask every little bit of it so that some of this effect will actually shine through. It does get broader in some areas than others. So, and I know some of these areas are more open than it appears. Now, most of the bright areas on this side of her face are covered in mask. But I'm still going to bring a pass down just so I can catch some of the other spots that may not be in mask yet. Now on this side of her head, it's not quite as vibrant, so I'm going to mix some of the quinacridone coral, and I like using some of the same colors that are in the skin for this process. So I'm mixing the quin coral with the quin gold in order to get some of the more reddish tones. I might still need a little bit of just the gold over here, so just grab a little bit of just the pure gold along the edge. I'm not sure I'm getting too much of the pure gold because I've got a lot of the coral blend already in it. And you know, we won't know until we remove the masking of how much of this is really taking effect. I may have masked it all too well and removed any glimpse of the other colors that I'm putting in here. I may find out that I just went too far with it. And then there's some very dark colors, and I do hope very much that these darkest areas will come through. And so I'm using the blue, the ultramarine blue with the quinacridone gold to mix some dark browns. Now I'm going with browns because I'm afraid if I go all the way to the black, that won't really look the way that Greta's hair really looks, because often in photography the darker colors end up looking more black than they really are in real life, and knowing what her hair is like, I don't want to overdo it and go too black, because then that won't look like her hair. And I do believe at least some of this is truly getting to the paper. I really suspect that I've gone a little too far on some of this masking. Now, gotta stay around her ear. I had not painted her ear yesterday. I realized when I stopped recording, so I came back in and painted that. And intentionally adding a few little strands coming down over her face. I mean, just to make the edge not look like it's this hard, super hard transition between head ending, hair starting. I want there to be a little bit of warmth and back and forth on it. And even though I did paint some flesh tone under there, I want it to look like there's little hair junctions. So I'm putting just little teeny tiny bits coming out here and there. And there's a little shadow that runs in front of her ear that's not quite dark enough yet, so I'm just going to do that with some of the hair color. All right, and get a little bit, I think I'm getting enough. Actually getting to the paper in this area, but I do want to bring it out to look, at least follow the right paths. All right, now I think I messed up. I brought this a little too far. I'm going to lighten some of that there. And this piece that I wanted to be an individual hair, I must have gotten some water on there and it bled out too much. So I'm going to remove that for now and we can add it back in later. And that's about all that I want to do at this point. There's a few individual hairs I can bring down. Now putting them over her shirt area, it's going to work out okay because the shirt is a very pale color. It's a white shirt basically, and I'll be able to add the vague shadows on it, of which actually there's a little bit of the blue shadows on here already from when I did the background. And there was one spot in the background where I lost a little bit of the shape of the shirt, so I wanted to correct that. And then just kind of blend that out so it doesn't look like it's a second paint application. And we have a little bit harder edge there. this is where the elastic is. Shoot, I may have just, oops. There's one bulge right here. I'm going to switch to this little brush. This is my best lifting brush, and since that's a staining color, I see that there was a little bit of my drawing that I missed, where the ruffled part of the, the flounce coming off of the sleeve, I just went over a little bit, so I want to pull a little of that back off that I just added, and it is staining, so I need to do it right away if I have any prayer of getting it off. And in fact, I have found, this is an interesting thing, I'm gonna do a little trick here for you. If I use a granulating color on top of the area that I want to lift, that actually helps the lifting process. I'm not quite sure whether the granulating color actually gets under the particles of the staining color, and therefore it helps you to lift it, but that is a little trick that I find generally works. Okay, so let me just shape this just a little bit more. So there's the granulating color. Now I can lift this off. That's so fascinating that works. All right, so the stain isn't totally gone, but it's light enough that it should work out. And then I'm not sure, I shouldn't be continuing with that brush. Let me stop with that. Shift to a soft round. And I want to get this very, very pale. And I might as well bring in some of the pale colors that are tinting the sleeves. It's interesting where these little shapes are that are pinky as compared to the ones. It's like the shadow areas are the areas that are in pink, which is intriguing to me because generally we think we want to add blues where the shadows are, and maybe since I think her dress has got a little bit on the maroon end of the color spectrum, I am guessing that maybe it's reflecting back on the white of the shirt, and that's why we're seeing that effect now. I want a little bit of cobalt blue mixed in with the very pale coral, because I do see little tiny areas where there's just a tiny bit of lavender in here. And I am going to blend these in a little more, but I want the basic shape in here, and then I'm going to come back and blend them out. So it's, they're hard-edged, and yet they are, there's something, a little softness to them as well. So it's getting that combination of the upper part appears to be a little bit more on the harder side, and the lower part appears to be on the side. And now a little more just cobalt blue. Running out of clean spaces here on my palette. And some of the wrinkles that really form the some of the puffy parts and also help to define where this little elastic section is are mostly in a light cobalt blue like color, and it kind of transitions into where some of the other colors are. That area tends to be pretty that area there is pretty white. Connect across the top of the elastic and the little pulls along the bottom of the elastic. And then we've got more little stripes of color with the folds. These are just the folds of the fabric. And when you're doing shadows on really pale white fabric, they're just these super pale washes that you need for that. And you'll see as I come and soften these little shadow areas, I'm leaving one side. Okay, let's see, this is her arm, so there's one more right here. I'm leaving one side fairly hard and one side fairly soft, but I don't want the hard side hard the whole way, so I'm softening that a little bit. And then let me repeat that. I'm going to bring the pink colors in first. And I'm just sort of trying to get a sense. I keep glancing over at the photo to get a sense of approximately where these little pinkish folds and kind of how far down do they go. But I'm not worried about getting them exactly in play, you know, in a specific spot. Just approximately, because it's a lovely splattering of color. The way that this goes back and forth between the pinks and the blues and the lavenders, and I just want to approximate that, rather than worried about, you know, is every wrinkle in exactly the spot where the little wrinkle should be. And, you know, is this one lavender and that one blue? You know, it's like I'm not angsting over that. I'm just kind of going for the general feel. Now let's get a little bit of the blue. I think a little more of the blue in that fold would make sense. And, you know, some of it's going to just kind of run together, which is good. I mean, I love it when the paint mixes on the page. Now, there's a dark shadow there. I'm not going to bring the dark shadow in yet. I want it to dry before I bring in the darker passages. And, you know, I do draw in an indication where the folds are, so they're, you know, they're coming out close to where they were in the photograph. but you'll also get to know with time kind of how folds look and approximately what you should be doing. Oops, I want to go into her arm. I've not painted her hand and her arm yet, so I got to keep the fabric colors off of those areas. All right, and the one other thing, let me eliminate some of this. One other thing I wanted to do was, there's all these little leftover pieces from yesterday, and some of them are kind of in the golden range where the colors mixed. And there's a little brocade around the edge of her shirt. That needs these kind of colors. And as it goes up into shaded areas, it actually gets a little darker. So I'm grabbing a little bit of the darker goldeny pieces and putting those up in the areas where I think the darker lace or brocade makes sense. And then there's other areas that are more in the sun that I want to have them a little bit more of the goldeny colors. So I'm grabbing little bits of different areas from my stuff that's on the palette. And I need to do the same thing over here. The more golden colors are towards the bottom where they're better lit. I'm going to grab a little bit of Quin Gold to throw in here too, just to really pop it up a smidge. And then move into the slightly more muted colors as I work my way up the brocade. And then now that I've got some of the darker colors in there, I'm going to come back with some slightly less dark colors. And there is a little bit of a pattern on here, but I'm going to wait. I'll wait for these to dry. Actually, this side has dried pretty well, so get some of the darker, a little bit darker blends. And I'm adding these little dots along approximately the area where the brocade appears to have them. And then on the inside, we need something that's kind of maroony, slightly darker than maroon. So I'm going to grab some of the Quin Burnt Orange and mix it in with, I believe I've got a little alizarin here. Maybe pull a little purple in here too. Ooh, that did it. All right, now I have about the right color. And we are seeing a little bit of an edge. So there's a little bit of a white shirt peeking out. But there's a little tiny edge of that fabric that's also peeking through. And on this side, where I put a shadow on her skin, I see now that it's really this little bit of an edge of the fabric of the dress that's peeking out on this side of the brocade. Continue that up, which makes me realize I need a little bit more of the golden brocade. Even though I've got hair masked up here, I need that also. All right. Now I'm going to grab that little lifting brush one more time, because when I did her skin under that gauzy fabric. I ran it down accidentally just a tiny bit over this white edge of the shirt. So I needed to lift that back off. And then I think her skin was supposed to have come right into that little corner. So I didn't futz about, do I have exactly the right mix here? I put it on there and then I'm just kind of pulling it out so that it will blend in with the rest. All right. The only other thing I want to do is make a tiny bit of black or super dark and see. I think I can put this pattern that's on the necklace. I can do those dots with that, but it's not quite thin enough to do the little black lines. So I'm grabbing one of my liner brushes. Bring these little black lines. Yep. Need a little more water. It doesn't want to flow. There we go. There's other little teeny tiny marks here and there. Suspicious that there's a little bit of a raised surface on the necklace, and that's causing let me bring in the string. And there's actually a little knot in the string right below, right above where the necklace attaches on each side. Okay. All right. And her earring, I need to lift just a little bit of the connector down to the earring area. Now, you know, having had a nice goldeny color under the dark that I added, I can actually carve out the shape of the earring. And I lost a little corner of her ear. Lower corner that I want to bring back. When I added the brown. And I'm also going to lift just a smidge at the top of the ear. Good. Now, some of these areas are not really as dark as I wanted them. Now that I see them dry, so, ooh, no. That is not what we wanted. That's better. Okay. The last thing I want to do is remove the masking and then find out that I don't have darks in here, so I'm going to come back and just reinforce a couple of these areas to make sure they're as dark as I need them to be. And, you know, it's that push and pull back and forth between dark brown and getting too black, so that's why I bring my other brush in here. If I need to remove a little tiny bit of the color, I can do that. And some of these are like longer transition things, and so I'm just putting little spots here and there and then pulling them out with the other brush. And you know, this is pretty typical of watercolor. You need to add some color. You find out, you know, when it dries, did it get too light, and do I need to reinforce it a little bit here and a little bit there before I proceed to the next step? Because if I remove all of this masking, thinking I'm coming back just to add more lights, and I don't have the darks, it's going to be really hard negative painting to get the darks in correctly. Some of that's going maroon into the dress. All right, I'm gonna stop here, let this all dry, and then come back later and see what we want to do next. My current plan, looking at this, is I want to remove, on my next pass, I'll remove all of this masking that I put on here, and then hopefully not find out that that I had it so masked that I have to almost start over with all the light colors, but we'll find out after it's totally dry, because I don't want to be rubbing hard on the surface. I just noticed there's a little tiniest light nostril part I needed to put in. You don't want the nostrils to be terribly dark, but you do need to have a little bit of something there. And then there's a little bit of a brownish gray shadow coming off of her nose. I had put in the pinky colors, but I hadn't come back and added any of the gray that needs to be there to kind of help define the shape of the nose. It's pretty subtle, so I'm trying to be... The last thing you want is you know, anything that looks like a little mustache, which I think my last little application of paint was nearing. So I pulled it up so it was just a little tiny shadow right under her nose. And I think that's the right answer. There's still... Having a little tiny bit, I still feel like this shadow needed to come up just a touch more. On this side, I think I might have it pretty close. All right. Because we do have curvature to our face, and we need to show that curvature. And I did include the line under her chin. But I want to just, there's little angles of the way the shadow comes down that I kind of couldn't do on my first pass, so I'm doing almost dry brush and hitting just the surface of the paper just to get some of the angular shadows coming in there. And I don't want that to be too much, because we want the lovely colors shining through, and not so much of the grays. But there is a need for a little bit of gray, so that's what I was just adding. Okie doke.